Hey, we got a roster. Okay. I'm going to go through this not super fast, but briskly. We'll proceed at a brisk pace because there's 53 people to talk about, or at least identify visually. And I won't talk about every single one of them, but a couple hits from each of these as the Texans announce their 53-man roster for now. As there always is, there's movement here and there along the fringes and edges. A couple position groups are chock full of human beings, wide receivers and running backs, 7 wide receivers, 5 running backs, and one of those kind of a fullback hybrid. So we'll get to that. Quarterbacks, CJ Stroud and Davis Mills. Where's Case Keenum? Case Keenum with his foot injury is going to be out for at least a few weeks. So they went ahead and slapped them on the IR, and not the one where he's able to return. So there's that. So with 2 quarterbacks on the roster, you still can have at some point they could add a third quarterback or put another quarterback on the practice squad that in case somebody gets hurt, he wouldn't be always available as a game day replacement, but you'd have that option, somebody that knows the system. And I won't be surprised if they do that. I think that the big thing here is just it's up to CJ Stroud to not get injured. And we'll talk about that when we get to the offensive line. So just don't get injured, CJ. Okay? Keep your head off the turf and just stay healthy and we'll be cool. I mean, see, he played with a broken separated shoulder all last year. It's not like he's not going to get injured, but he has a pretty good toughness for hanging through him. Davis Mills, I'm totally cool with. I was happy. I don't know, happy's not the right word. Case just didn't look physically right in those last couple of games, and it makes sense that it's been bothering him. The report was that he felt like he was at about 70% the last couple of weeks, and some of his errant throws or inaccurate throws, even on the completions in that last game, it didn't look so hot. That's good to see. So quarterbacks, I'm A-okay with for now. Running backs. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. You know, we were all, or many of us were questioning exactly what was going to happen with Dameon Pierce. I came to terms with it this morning, talking about it with Sean Pendergast. I think it makes sense right now with 5 running backs, given that Dare Ogunbowale is a very good special teams player and they like having him around. British Brooks making the team gives you a guy that's, I think, very capable of playing fullback. This is the only play I'll show on this live stream because I didn't have time to get enough stuff together. But here's British Brooks, just so you can see what we're talking about. Back this up a little bit. He's the fullback here. And just watch as this defensive lineman comes through the line, unchecked, I think by design, but watch what British Brooks does to him. Just ka-ka! And then and then watch. I want you to, if you didn't notice this the first time, you've probably already seen this clip. Watch him get ready right here. He's standing, he's ready to throw a 3-punch combo. Yeah, and look at how excited he was. He was looking at the sideline. After one of his other blocks, he looked at this sideline. I would guess that somebody gave him a pep talk beforehand about this is the last preseason game. We're going to ask you to line up as a off-ball tight end, H-back. We're going to ask you to line up as a fullback. Let's see what you're capable of. And he understood the assignment. He went after it. So I feel very good about the fact that British Brooks making the team. And as many of you know, I understand why we have these hybrid tight end fullbacks these days. You want somebody who's versatile, can play tight end, can be used as a receiver, can block out of the backfield. Very few of them can do it, partly just because they're too tall. To be 6'3" or taller and to get down and root out linemen and linebackers and really make them question how hard they want to fill next time, or maybe probably not. We shouldn't say ring their bell anymore but you just put a good shock into them. I think that British Brooks has that in him. Picking up pass protection and everything else, it's always dicey with the rookie, but there's more potential in a couple of the hits I've seen him impose as one of these plays. He was releasing on a route and jarred the defensive end harder than I've seen any of the other fullbacks do in the last few years. So I like the notion of having British Brooks, but I do also think that with Damian, wherever he is right now, and again, this is a lot of running backs to carry. I think they're still waiting for it to click with him. I think they want to see him have opportunities with good blocking in a game. I disagree, I think, with probably how D'Amico and Caserio feel about Damian right now, but there's no denying his upside because we've seen his upside. So he does his best work, in my opinion, when there's a fullback on the field. I think when you're running leads and powers and old school blocking, which the Texans do, it's not like all they do is outside zone, and including a fullback when there's outside zone. That nice run he had to the outside to the right, I can't remember which game it was last year. That was with a lead blocker in the game. So I like it. If you're going to get the best out of Dameon Pierce, having a fullback who can actually wallop people makes a lot of sense. I just don't know if they can keep this inflated number of running backs around all season once the injuries, start to mount up. Once Christian Harris comes back from the short-term IR, once Kurt Heinisch comes back from the short-term IR, those guys are eligible after 4 weeks to return. We'll get to them. But then you got to start making some decisions. So if you almost think of this as like a rolling, okay, what do we really have with Dameon Pierce this year? And can he click for us? I think they probably they don't want to let go of the possibility of that happening. So I'm cool with it for now. It's there's no position group that's way out of whack with the numbers. But if somebody becomes available on the waiver wire or is currently available on the waiver wire, or there's somebody out there available for trade, they might mess with these numbers a little bit. And British Brooks might be the guy they don't keep. But very, very happy that Cam Akers made the team. That was an experiment I was skeptical of, and he passed every test. He passed every single test. Was he quick enough? Was he athletic enough? Is he physical enough? Is he still capable as a receiver out of the backfield? All those things I'm cool with. So we'll see. And I'm genuinely 100%, regardless of what my opinion is right now. Just like I was happy to be proven wrong in being skeptical of Cam Akers, I really, really hope I'm wrong about Dameon Pierce. I hope I look back and think it was my dumbest opinion that I've ever had, because I do realize that it's still in there. It's still in there for him somehow. It's what's the right situation for getting it out of him. Offensive line, when we get back to CJ not getting injured. Oh, wide receivers. Let's do that first. Stephon Diggs, Robert Woods, Tank Dell, John Mechie, Nico Collins, Xavier Hutchinson, Steven Sims. The surprise here is the number of wide receivers. 6 on average. It's not a huge surprise that they have 7, given how deep they were. But Noah Brown's the one that probably makes the most sense to have let go because of his injury history. He missed 6 or 7 games last year. He was injured all of training camp for the most part. I mean, didn't play in any of the preseason games. So I get that. I do wonder if maybe some trade offers are being entertained. You guys can notify me if I missed any news or anything like that. As one of you point out too, possible Dameon Pierce trade as well. That's out there. But I think just like there's teams that would want to trade for Dameon because of that I say untapped potential, that potential that we haven't seen in a couple of years, then I think the Texans probably feel the same way. All right, like let's see if we can get it to click for him. You hope it doesn't have to come in crucial situations. I think Cam Akers gets more carries initially than Dameon Pierce does, but that might depend on matchups and whatnot. Between Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie, I thought both of them would make the team. I think Steven Sims, I think he was one of the guys that maybe was competing for a spot in that last game, and he showed up in a big way. His ability as a returner and on special teams, they've always weighted very heavily, so that weighs into it as well. And there's a speed element there that if one of these guys goes down, he can stretch the field in a way that not a lot of other receivers can. So it's I'm good with I think the wide receivers are deep as hell, but there also might be a trade coming along. Tight ends. I think just Tegan Catoriano and Quentin Tarantino. I don't think either of them were destined to make the team as a tight end this year. Maybe in another year, Tegan Catoriano could have. Quentin Tarantino only if he cast himself in the role, which he likes to do. And fourth string tight end would be a minor role in a football movie, but it makes sense with what they have right now. I got to give credit On the thumbnail, I said battles fought and won. For Brevin Jordan, it's been a 2-year process. At the beginning of last season, and maybe halfway into it, I would have said, man, this is probably the last year for Brevin Jordan in 2023. And things just started clicking for him. They used him in multiple different ways. And then this year, you go into the offseason, and D'Amico just gushed about Brevin Jordan a couple of times unprompted. And we've seen it. We've seen the potential. We saw the potential last year in that with the really big touchdown play was the most notable one. But in a lot of ways, I think as a blocker on blitzes, just don't hold. But other than that, it's his ability as a receiver is very valuable. And this is a nice mix of guys too. I think with Brevin Jordan and Dalton, Brevin Jordan's the more athlete, the athletic F type of tight end. Dalton Schultz, hybrid, not a great blocker. Cade Stover is not a great blocker yet. He's had some rough snaps, but he's also had some really good snaps that show his promise as a blocker. For a guy that's only played the position for 2 years, I'm optimistic that he's going to develop into a good blocker. I don't know how long it'll take, but he just needs reps, needs lots and lots of reps. And he's obviously very capable as a receiver too. So I feel very good about the tight ends, especially in this offense. I mean, we've already seen in a few instances in the preseason with limited reps with CJ Stroud out there. CJ Stroud in that first game versus the Steelers had a primary read to his right. There was pressure in his face. CJ shuffled to his left a little bit, found Cade Stover and hit him. And it wasn't a magnificent highlight reel thing or anything, but I think it shows the trust that he has in Cade Stover's route running and understanding defenses already. Dalton Schultz, we've seen this multiple times. Dalton Schultz has gotten the ball a lot when he wasn't in the concept, because he's got a really good sense for how to adjust the coverages, how to tweak his routes. His communication with CJ is really good. I think that continues to grow this year. So I feel very good about the tight ends. Offensive line, I think that they might still be looking to add to the offensive line. I feel very good about the tackles. I feel very good about Shaq Mason. I feel very good in the long term about Juice Scruggs and Kenyon Green. I think both those guys showed notable improvement from day one of camp till the end of it. I think having some continuity with all the veterans out there, especially for Juice Scruggs, it makes a big difference having like what the guards are next to you, and having a veteran next to you helps a lot. With Kenyon Green, he's got a veteran next to him and Laramie Tunsil. Both Juice Scruggs and Kenyon Green, they showed a lot of promise on their good plays. Their bad plays, I think, have been very correctable and have been more about timing in the run game more so than anything else. I'm still nervous about the run game. I still need to see it in action, but there are also some elements of how the preseason went where when they faced odd fronts, 3-4 defenses a couple times after facing a 4-3 all during camp, there were some adjustments there. Some of the run blocking rules, I think, need to be tweaked a little bit, or at least they were experimenting with them. So it's a work in progress. Kendrick Green, I think, is a guy for just, if I want to highlight guys who have won battles, Kendrick Green was run out of Pittsburgh 3 years ago. He's a rookie center for the Steelers, and it was some of the worst centering I've seen in football. He was a mess. And the Texans, so the next year, the Steelers didn't even try him at center. They had him play fullback, and it wasn't like a gadget thing. They wanted to see if he could play fullback. They didn't like what they saw, and he ended up not playing the entire year. So when the Texans brought him in last year, and then they put him at guard, I was really skeptical. And I thought he fought his ass off and played way, way, way better than he did as a center in Pittsburgh. So happy to see him make the team. I think Jarrett Patterson's going to be just fine over time. I'm not so sure. Like Jarrett Patterson and Blake Fisher right this moment, I wouldn't feel awesome about being in the game. There's things you can do to protect them and make up for some of their youth if they are in the game. But those guys both have a lot of potential, and they just still need development. So swing offensive tackle is the one that we were spoiled last year by George Fant. When your third string offensive tackle steps in and plays right tackle and plays so well that he ends up getting a much more lucrative contract elsewhere. that's a luxury that not a lot of teams have. So maybe they go outside the organization for that. Like I don't think Nick Broker is a natural offensive tackle. I think he's more of a guard. So I don't feel super awesome about swing tackle right now. If Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil stay healthy, it's no big deal at all. I know some people were speculating that Titus Howard's job might be in danger, and I never felt that for a moment. Titus is just simply much better at this point. He might not, you could argue about whether he's worth his contract or anything, I suppose, but he's a very solid NFL right offensive tackle. He's just got to stay healthy. Defensive line. Okay. So defensive line, there were three guys that I thought had a shot of making the team that didn't. So we've got Ali Gay, we've got Solomon Byrd, both defensive ends, and then Marcus Harris. All those guys were released. Aaron Wilson reported that the Texans would like to have all three of those guys back on the practice squad. First, they have to clear waivers. So that process will start tomorrow evening or whenever. I think both Solomon Byrd and Ali Gay, if they were pressed into action, could play now, and you'd feel good about it. I think Marcus Harris is a little bit more raw, and you'd want to use him situations where he's not going to have to stand up to the run. He's a smaller guy, and you think of Ed Oliver. I know I've made this comparison before. Ed Oliver was a shorter guy who was lightning quick, and he was a better overall talent and prospect. He went in the first round of the Bills. But it took him a couple years to really figure out how to use his hands, how to compensate for his lack of length in a lot of ways. But you knew that he could do it. He has all that potential. I think Marcus Harris fits that bill too. He's undersized in that he's shorter, but he's not tiny or anything. It's not like he's getting blown off the ball because he's just too light. He just needs to learn a few tricks of the trade, and then I'll feel good about him. They've only got 9 right now. D'Amico loves stockpiling defensive linemen. So at some point, maybe they add another guy, or maybe it's Ali Gay or Solomon Byrd at some point. Ali Gay and Solomon Byrd, I think, I don't know how high their potential is, but they both have good technique, and I think you can rely on them to not screw up. So those guys are options down the road. I know a lot of you are wondering about just the run defense with the defensive tackles and with Christian Harris being out. So far, I think Foley Fatukasi is going to be just fine as a run defender. I think Mario Edwards is a little bit more of a, combo. All right, can play defensive tackle, but it can also penetrate. I don't know, not necessarily rack up sacks, but get a lot of pressure right up the gut. I feel good about those guys. It's not like the Indianapolis Colts interior defensive line or anything, but I think they're going to be just fine. Heinisch being gone made on IR right now, made it a slam dunk for sure that Khalil Davis was going to make the team. If I had to choose between Heinisch and Khalil Davis, I would probably go with Khalil Davis. But the fact that they put Heinisch on the 4-man IR, it might be as simple as, hey, they've got 9 defensive linemen right now. If everybody's healthy 4 weeks from now and Heinisch comes back, then they'll probably have 10 defensive linemen, and not too much to think about other than that. Tim Settle Jr., who's been injured the whole camp, I'm just guessing they must really like him. Let me pull up a little bit here because I can't find linebackers. Here we go. All right. This is where the rubber meets the road. So 6 linebackers, and that's not – in the old days, you'd have in a 4-3, you'd have 7 linebackers, but the Texans are in nickel, which is a 4-2 alignment most of the time. And, who had pointed this out? Texans commenter had pointed out that also Jalen Petrie being a hybrid player also kind of, messes with the numbers a little bit. So you could almost add Jalen Petrie into this because he's a nickel linebacker in a lot of respects. The biggest thing, one of you I saw early, right when we got started, had asked about, are we going to get run on with Christian Harris out? I'm not worried about that. I think the Texans have linebackers who can play the run. It's what about the combo? What about stopping the run and in coverage? And that's where, Jake Hansen is a speedier guy and you love his athleticism, but he doesn't necessarily bring it on the run side as much if he has to play on the inside. Henry To'oTo'o, he's not going to be what Christian Harris is in coverage if he's playing the will. Delshon Phillips, and Jamal Hill are both very athletic, but also, Delshon Phillips hasn't had a boatload of time as a linebacker. He's a very good special teams player. Jamal Hill's very, very raw. That's a position of concern if you want to be a genuinely elite defense. They got by last year. Think about the first half of the season. They were a competitive defense without Christian Harris playing the way he did in the second half of the season. And it's one position for now. I'm not going to be overly dramatic about it unless we get, unless it's just you get blown out of the park or something. The part that I can, obviously, unless I was wrong in not being that concerned about run defense against athletic quarterbacks. I mean, think about Christian Harris last year versus Lamar Jackson with that kind of shoe swing swipe he had in the first half. Plays like that are, harder to come by for non-Christian Harris types. So when they go against Anthony Richardson and he pulls the ball down and a linebacker has to come out of coverage and come up and make a tackle, there's not anybody on the roster right now that's going to do that quite like Christian Harris. So don't get me wrong, it's a lot harder to play awesome defense, especially in this defense without Christian Harris. It's just not the end of the world right now, particularly if you get a really good pass rush out of those defensive linemen up front. To go back to the defensive line, I think if Jerry Hughes wasn't on the team, then maybe Ali Gay or Solomon Byrd makes the team. They just loaded up on defensive ends. And Danico Autry, after 6 weeks, he comes back. So then you're adding to the D-line numbers again. So some of these guys on this defensive line roster, as long as there aren't, let's say if there's no injuries, by week 7, at least one of these guys will be swapped out for Danico Autry. Maybe somebody else gets swapped out when Kurt Heinisch comes back, but there also is a potential that Solomon Byrd or Ali Gay comes back up. Where'd we get to? Defensive backs? Okay. Defensive backs. I thought I was going to do this in 10 minutes. Defensive backs. So now I quit. I'm not quitting the live stream. I just quit on trying to do this in 20 minutes because I know I've seen you guys have made a lot of really good points here too, and some of you are way more pessimistic, probably with justifiable reason. But I'm high in the moment. Okay, I like to envision a world in which this is the 53-man roster. Nobody gets injured. Some guys that you didn't expect to perform rise up to the occasion. Some other guys are maybe disappointments. Somebody else takes his place. I like to live in a simple world. Just give me a few rules and let's roll. But we know it doesn't work out that way. Defensive backs. Okay. Jalen Petrie listed as a safety, and he will play safety and base at times. And, and he's going to be playing nickelback at times. I think when there's another team that has 3 super speedy wide receivers, that's when you might see Jalen swap out and play more safety. And then you have somebody like a Miles Bryant go down and play in the slot. I think that last game between Des King and Miles Bryant, I think they were in competition for backup nickelback or just, utility cornerback. And I don't think the muffed punt probably did it for Des King, but Miles Bryant was super productive in that game. And Des King had that one tackle out in the flat where he just took a bad angle, and what should have been a kind of a nothing 5-yard reception ended up being more than that. I just saw Miles Bryant show up more and more often, more impactfully and more often. Lonnie Johnson was released. I pour one for Lonnie Johnson just because, like I said in that video a couple videos ago, he shows up a lot and they're saying his name a lot, but for all the right reasons this go around. First go around with the Texans, it wasn't always for the right reasons. It was for defensive holdings or it was for this or that. I think he's matured a lot, and I think there's something there. There's some potential. It's just now he's been playing safety for 4 or 5 years now. He was miscast as a cornerback. He's just way too big. So maybe he gets picked up somewhere else. Maybe he finds himself back on the Texans later on down the road. I feel very good about Kamari Lassiter. I feel very good about Derek Stingley. But this is also Derek Stingley, who hasn't had a fully healthy season since 2019. The depth at cornerback, I don't feel so hot about right now. And that's when this is another area where I think there might be movement sooner than later. I think there might be somebody might become available for trade, or that has hit the waiver wire that already that the Texans like better. And I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of these guys gets swapped out by the end. The last one, special teams. I got nothing to say other than that I love watching Tommy Townsend punt. I loved Cam Johnston, and he was very, very good for the Texans, but he did not have the hang time that Tommy Rockets does. I had said that I didn't think Rockets was the right word because it's more of a high arching thing. So I thought like a medieval archer, but a bunch of you pointed out that medieval catapult machine, which is called what? A trebuchet, Tommy Trebuchet. I kind of like that. It might be a little too, I don't know. I don't know if that one is for the masses. I don't know if everybody would get that as much. Let's get to some of your questions and comments and good points about things that I almost certainly missed. Lonnie left. It was his choice. Oh, okay. I haven't seen this story yet, or I don't know what please expand on that, Brandon, because I'm not aware of a lot of the stories around the rest of it. Tom Bomb, okay, the Tom Bomb. Tommy Trebuchet is a mouthful. Yeah, the fact that I couldn't remember it is one thing. I just got a text from Sean Pendergast about the Astros. I know, Sean. I should be watching them right now, but I've got people that rely on me and depend on me to not know stories about Lonnie Johnson or how to pronounce trebuchet. Texans fans are highbrow. We can handle trebuchet. Let's see. Anyone else feel Lassiter and Bullock could have breakout rookie years? Yes, 100%. And Lassiter's been relatively, I don't want to say ignored, but I haven't seen many stories about him in the national media. I think part of that is he only played one preseason game, and Daniel Jones, in all his wisdom, chose to test Derek Stingley instead of the rookie second-round cornerback. Now, that might have been Dayball testing Daniel Jones. I wonder about that. So whatever it was, it wouldn't have been a wise regular season strategy. Maybe it was the perfect wake-up call for Daniel Jones. It's just, don't do that stuff you did. But, I mean, he couldn't throw to a damn tight end and threw the ball when he was getting sacked. So, yes, I feel like he could. And as far as Bullock, yes. I think with Bullock, it's really a matter of, okay, how much can they trust him as a rookie, especially when he starts seeing more complex stuff offensively. I think you're going to see some Kalen Bullock early on, and they'll try to kind of see exactly how much he can and can't do. And, he's a guy that's kind of raw in a lot of respects, but also has some skills you just can't teach. I think he tracks the ball really well. He's got range. He's got an appetite for violence that might be a little above his body weight and frame at this point. But I try not to worry about that and think about Kevin Johnson. Kevin Johnson had an appetite for violence, but he was not the guy. He was like an English gentleman trying to step into a bar fight or something. You're not gonna win that fight, Archibald. I know you're trained by the finest fencing teachers, but that doesn't help with a pint glass against your head. I might have missed it, but who do you think makes the practice squad? I went through a few of the guys. Boy, off the top of my head, I named you the 3 defensive linemen. I can't do it right now. Let's see. Would have preferred Lonnie over Murray. Murray, this is what I try to, with Murray, because I saw somebody else had said that too. I think with Eric Murray, he has genuine versatility. And part of it with Murray is I think a lot of us, like I include myself in this, there's always a little bit of a grudge against the fact that Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby paid him like he was a starting cornerback in the league. And it didn't make any sense. It was like it was in a year especially where they let the DJ Reader go. The defense already had huge issues. You remember, however many unanswered scores they allowed in that Chiefs playoff game. And the one move they made in the offseason was to sign Eric Murray. I think Eric Murray has value as a utility guy. So I get it. I think that's not a huge concern of mine right now. I think if he had come in, if he'd been drafted by the Texans and I think he'd be one of these guys. You're like, yeah, look at that. Eric Murray keeps sticking around. I'm not saying that he couldn't be swapped out by somebody, but I just don't have as much of an issue with it overall. Let's see. Have to disguise the defense a lot. Yeah. Now, that is one thing that theoretically Jalen Petrie helps with. If you look at the Texans defense at the end of last season, they started to disguise their coverages a lot more to a degree that they hadn't done earlier in the season. That was one of the reasons that Joe Flacco had the trouble that he did. The other thing, too, that we haven't seen yet is Derek Stingley, we now know, can and will be asked to travel with the best receiver at times. So the one little wrinkle in that is that Kamari Lassiter has spent his entire preseason on the right side. So we know that Derek Stingley can travel, but then you're also asking your rookie cornerback perhaps to go out of his comfort zone. So I don't think it's necessarily something that we see early on in the season. Now, if you're putting Derek Stingley down, and then he travels with a guy no matter what, but Kamari still stays on the right side and they shift to different coverages. Yeah, there's all manner of possibilities. But I do think that they weren't just trying to ambush at the end of the season. I think they probably got to a point where D'Amico felt enough guys knew the defense well enough that they could get away with disguising a little bit. And, now when you start doing it earlier in the season, offenses are going to have the ability to see it and adjust to it. So it's not like they don't have that ambush effect, but I think they will do it more. So it's a test for D'Amico. They were very vanilla in a lot of ways last year. And I think D'Amico gets a little bit more not freaky exotic, but kind of exotic, She's like a woman that doesn't usually wear lipstick. She put some lipstick on, a little garter or something like that. You don't have to be a complete slut about it. But you can just, tease it a little bit. Mr. Irrelevant. Lonnie left. It was his choice. Brandon, did you update me on that? Brandon, why did you just throw that out there and then not update me on that? Get ready for the British bulldozer. Man, I really like the fact that British Brooks made the team for a couple of reasons. I talked about this at the very beginning. If you heard me suffer through this one more time, but I'm genuinely excited about it. Look, I grew up in a bygone era where the old school fullback was a common fixture on teams. The actual, what now we all call 21 defense, where you got two backs and one tight end. That actually used to be called regular. That formation in a lot of offenses was called regular because that was the regular formation that you saw. Oh, of course. God damn it. That's right. This is America. And we drink milk, we eat potatoes, and our football offenses have a fullback. And then, of course, things changed. The passing game became more important. A lot of people predicted the complete and total demise of the fullback, and that certainly hasn't happened. But you want to have a fullback that, at the very least, has some receiving ability, that can stress the defense in different ways than just as a blocker. And it's really, really good if he also has skill as a running back. So if I'm going to take a hybrid fullback, if I've got an opportunity for a big, thick dude who can also run the ball, but who, as he showed versus the Rams, I mean, he can swing a sledgehammer on bros, and he did it. And it wasn't even just when he was a blocker. He was releasing on a pass once and gave a death shock 5-finger punch to the defensive end on his way out of the route. And it was like there were a couple collisions in that game. I know, against backups, blah, blah, blah. There are collisions against much larger human beings that I haven't seen out of a fullback by the Texans. So I'm really intrigued by that. And then the double benefit of that potentially is that I do think that if it does click for Damian works best with a fullback on the field. Old school, run power, run lead, run toss around the end with a lead blocker. Whatever you're running, if there's a fullback, pin and pull, have a lead blocker and give a really nice clear path for Damian to see it. And they might have something there. I like that I think that last game was a genuine competition amongst the running backs, and I think all of them showed up. Jawar Jordan did some good things. J.J. Taylor did some good things. But nobody, I mean, the best blocker, the best fullback on the field that day, including some of the starters or potential starters who lined up as tight ends in the backfield, like it was British Brooks. So that's exciting. I like that a lot. And I like for maybe what it means for Dameon Pierce. It might mean good things for Dameon Pierce. The only thing that baffles me is how many times does Dameon Pierce have to lose yardage before D'Amico and Slowick realize it's not working. I know. You know, and I tried to think about that. I'm really trying to check my preconceptions and biases on this. And I don't like talking bad about Dameon Pierce. I feel bad about myself after some of these live streams or after my sports radio show in the morning. Sports Radio 610 from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday. So, because I love Dameon Pierce, and there's nothing wrong with him in terms of his energy, his effort, his energy. It's all the stuff that you want in a football player, except that right now, even when the blocking's bad, it's just not clicking the way it used to click. He, going back to last season, he just hasn't broken tackles the way he used to break tackles. I've talked too much about his body weight and how I think he should be heavier. I do understand Nick and D'Amico maybe just feeling like, all right, he's close to clicking. He's looked better in practice this training camp than he did last training camp in terms of grasping the offense. I'm very skeptical of practice performances in general because it's tackle football. And at super physical positions like running back, it's training camp lies. It just lies. You'll see, oh, this guy's having good practices. Yeah, it's good practices. And then you got to see it in the game at some point when people are trying to tackle you. So if Cam Akers hadn't made the team, I would flip out. Even if there were no Cam Akers and that wasn't a consideration, I'd be really, really nervous if they went into the season right now expecting Dameon Pierce to be their genuine number 2 running back. He might be listed at number 2 on the depth chart. I wouldn't read too much into that, but that's not the situation for now. You haven't had injuries start to mount up for now. They will get injuries at some point, hopefully not mounting up, but there will be injuries. So as a trial period, as long as they don't stick with it too long, like, all right, I can deal with this. If the Astros had gone out and gotten a viable first baseman in the offseason and Jose Abreu, who was really good in September and October, really late August as well, that complicated everything too. I mean, Dameon didn't have a great end of the season last year the way Jose Abreu did. But even so, the fact that they were so thin at first base, that made me really nervous. The presence of Cam Akers makes me less nervous about it because it doesn't feel as bereft of options as first base did for the Astros early in the year. But you also can't spend forever figuring it out. Last year they spent too long figuring it out. Flying high with me. I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling good. I told my wife that I was going to be in for the end of the Astros game, but I don't know if that's going to happen now because, frankly, if anybody has any update on that Lonnie Johnson story, by God, I'd be. Oh, here we go. Oh, okay. Let's see. Nope, Brandon, I've asked you to explain the Lonnie Johnson story, and I have yet to see it yet. Brandon early on said that Lonnie chose to leave, and I don't know what he's referring to. I'm ignorant of this story. I mean, we've been to practices. I don't think any of us noticed Pierce. Right. And again, that's why with running backs, especially, I rib Sean Pendergast about it because every year during OTAs, he gets super excited about some running back. I'm like, Sean, this isn't no pads. And the running backs and defensive backs to me are always the most impressive people on the football field in terms of just sheer athleticism, because the running backs, it's all a matter of size and speed and power to body weight that I'm so impressed by, like power to body weight and the way they can shift to as large human beings. It's always just really impressive to me. So especially in OTAs, I'm blown away by their athleticism, but I try not to read anything into it. And then defensive backs, just because they're freaks of nature. Wide receivers are too, but defensive backs, it's more impressive to me because of the multi-directional aspect to it. And they tend to be funnier too. The defensive back room tends to be the funniest, I think, room on the team on average. Tell me if that's backed up by your experience on your football teams. I've usually just always enjoyed, I've always really, really enjoyed hanging out with defensive backs, except I can't keep up with them partying. It's a different, I just, when I was a younger man, so with physical freakdom also comes freakish endurance sometimes, and is a phrase that Mike Shula used to use is some people just have a natural capacity for diminishing themselves, but you should never confuse yourself for one of those people. For me, it was trying to confuse myself with defensive backs. Several other disparities in general too. The worry is that we won't have it and they move on. The worry is that he doesn't have it and D'Amico keeps going with him for 7 more games. Right. That's the worry. The small sample size. That's why. And this is hard too because I don't like disagreeing with D'Amico. When D'Amico said that Damian just needed more opportunities, it wouldn't have bothered me or made me as concerned if he had said that early in 2022. If Damian was having a training camp like this in 2022 and he said, well, he just needs more opportunities, 7 carries, it can't tell you a whole lot, all that. I get it. It's a small sample size. But we saw them over and over again try to give him more opportunities at the beginning of last year. And that's my concern, is that there's a little bit of a history here. I'm surprised we didn't trade Noah Brown. I think Noah Brown's injury history, probably, including his recent injury history, but also last year of being banged up for pretty much half the season, I think that's probably a red flag for a lot of teams in terms of actually giving up a draft pick for him. I do, Patty. Thank you. They built my house for me, basically. I always tell coaches, there's a few coaches and obviously organizations that I feel like Dom Capers and Vic Fangio, I genuinely feel materially grateful for them. I think if I had been in a different system or played for a different team or whatever, I don't think I would have done. I don't think I would have played as long in the NFL, and I don't think I would have been a starter as much as I was. My first 5 years in the NFL, I was okay. And I actually had Dom Capers as a coordinator in Jacksonville, but he wasn't able to run his true defense because of the personnel. And he just came in, and I think it was a nice challenge for him, and he did really well for a couple of years. But when I got here and I was able to play with Vic Fangio's rules in that defense, it just unlocked a whole different side of me. And this is why with Damian too, I try to put it from my perspective where my career changed in a lot of ways just by getting into the right system and, being on a team with the right coaches and being around the right guys and everything. And with Damian, as short as running backs' careers are, it might work out that this just isn't the right system for him. And maybe he would thrive elsewhere. So it's not just, man, I want him to do something for the Texans thought. It's that, God, daylight's burning on Damian's career. He's a running back. On average, his next 2 years will be his peak years. And then after that, it slowly diminishes on average. But there's exceptions all the time, of course. So, I mean, if they keep him, or if they try him for a few games and it doesn't work out, I really I hope that they can trade him and just do a 7th round pick swap. I don't care, and get him somewhere where maybe he can really unlock what he's capable of doing in the NFC. So there's that. If the defense is convinced D'Amico will run the ball with DP no matter what, then we can play action on those plays. That's true. Okay. There was a period at the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career where every now and then he'd throw a deep ball, and it was very clear that he had set up the deep ball by being really bad at throwing the deep ball. So, corners would be squatting on stuff, and all of a sudden Roethlisberger once every 3 games would show up like old Roethlisberger for a play or two, and he'd have a guy wide open deep because nobody thought he could throw the deep ball. So if Damian, maybe by some of Damian's perceived weaknesses, boy, that would be the chess move of all time. Maybe they put Damian in intentionally difficult situations. Remember the Steelers game, they were running Damian to the right, and that was where the 2 backup offensive linemen that was the first time Patterson had ever played right guard. Broker was out playing tackle, and they ran him to the right. Okay. Little 5-dimensional chess here by Bobby Slowick. All right. I'm game, man. Like I said, I genuinely 100% without any irony hope I'm wrong. I want Dameon Pierce to be awesome because I know that the best version of Dameon Pierce can be awesome for the Texans, but he's the kind of kid that you want to see succeed, and I genuinely really hope I'm wrong. I'm wrong about enough stuff all the time. That's a fact of life. It's inevitability. So if I were to be able to choose what I'd like to be wrong about, that's number one up on the list in the football world. I've got a nephew I hope I'm wrong about in other respects. Get this kid's act together. Let's see. I'm just joking. That was like 10 years ago. He got his act together. I was surprised. I wasn't wrong. I knew he could do it. He Dameon Pierced it. He was going down a stretch where it looked like he wasn't going to get his act together, but he got his act together. Oh, he's wearing Vontae Leach's old number. Okay, good. Oh, too, there's something about – I like the fact that Neville Hewitt is 43 and British Brooks is 44, just because I feel like those two are of the same mind, kind of the same build. They're just like scary, muscular dudes that have an appetite for violence and on the football field. And I like that they're kind of brothers in that regard, 43 and 44. Is Hewitt going to replace Christian Harris for those few games? Okay, that's where I think you're going to see a rotating cast of will linebackers. I think sometimes it'll be Henry To'oTo'o. I think sometimes it's going to be Hansen. I think it'll be Neville Hewitt, depending on just how badly they need to stop the run. I mean, Neville Hewitt's like the modern day version of a nose tackle, I think. It's that you don't necessarily want to see him dropping off into coverage all that often, but maybe, you pop a nose tackle off into spy every now and then and he gets a pick like Keith Traylor back in the day. But really what he excels at is stopping the run. So when he's playing Sam or when he's playing Will, I think it's in certain situations. And just like it was last year in a lot of respects, because of injuries, they rotated a lot of guys through. So I could see To'oTo'o being the Sam when they're in base sometimes. I could see To'oTo'o being the Will, but other times when they need better athletes, maybe they switch out Delshon Phillips or somebody like that. And we'll see how Jamal Hill comes along. Jamal's very raw. He was moved from safety to linebacker, and he's playing linebacker at Oregon, which is a whole different world. So he just needs some seasoning. And, maybe at some point, this is, the beauty of D'Amico. We saw it, right? We saw D'Amico sprinkle his pixie dust on Christian Harris. Halfway through the season, it just clicked for him. Henry To'oTo'o has looked a lot more comfortable. I think he lost some weight. I know he didn't fess up to losing weight, but you can see it in his cheekbones. He's just sleeker. He's got more of a blue steel vibe about him now. Polynesian blue steel. Very rare and precious metal. Oh, the Colts got Derek Rivers. I know we did. It was almost like it was like when you have somebody that at your workplace, like at 610, we have sales staff and people in radio sales, it's just like it's a rotisserie league of various salespeople going from one station to another. And every now and then you'll see somebody in the hallway and you'll be like, I'm pretty sure they weren't here for like 3 years, but I don't want to embarrass myself and say anything about it. So you just nod and say, "What's up, bro?" Because you don't know their name. Okay, you're right. I don't think they'll even be top 50, to be honest. I hope they're top 50 in the NFL. I don't know what top 50 you're talking about, but I hope it's top 50 in the NFL. It'd be shocking if they weren't. Do you think Beck got outed without a chance? Okay, I like Beck. Everything I've said about British Brooks and what I've seen of him in a very small sample size, but with a lot of pop and explosion against, one of those plays in that game was against a defensive lineman. I never really saw that out of Beck. And in some respects, I don't think you don't have to look at it as an indictment of Beck as much as, look, they have 3 tight ends already that they can use as a fullback in certain situations. And Beck was kind of like an undersized fullback or tight end who was playing fullback all the time, but didn't necessarily really bring it as a blocker. the pop and the physicality that British Brooks is capable of, I don't think there was another fullback on the roster that had that same potential. So it's a little bit of a gamble because it's picking up pass protections and everything else like that, picking up the more complex defenses he's going to see and going against starters. It's a bit of a gamble, but like he can swing a sledgehammer on a thimble. He can really, I think he can do some damage. And there's an upside there that's really intriguing to me. And he also has the added benefit too, right? Of, all right, when you have a fullback in the game, you want to be sure that the defense that you're not so one-dimensional, that the defense knows what their threats are and are not. With Brooks, I mean, look at that audition in that last game. They used him as a receiver, they used him as a runner, and they used him as a blocker. I think they want versatility out of him. And I think that not only did he show capability in it, but you saw by how excited he was after a couple of those blocks that like he showed he's that kind of kid that just wants to play football and tell me what I got to do. I'll go out and do it. Like that kind of attitude. I think that sometimes can push a guy over the edge. Now, I feel bad because like there's no way in hell Jawar Jordan or JJ Taylor were ever going to be running fullbacks. So they didn't have the ability to compete on that level or in that role. But I think it's as much of a skill set decision as it is anything about Andrew Beck and his current injury. And however, I don't know. I feel like I keep hearing that Andrew Beck's going to be fine, and then I keep not seeing Andrew Beck. He looks magnificent on the sideline. He's the guy's built like a Nordic god. Let's see. Still wouldn't have hurt to have Braylon Allen on the team doing something similar. Let's go, Kevin Walter. I don't know you, and you certainly don't know me, so chill, my friend. Okay, there's drama on here. That's all right, guys. That's all right, fellas. I want Marcus Harris back. Marcus Harris is one of the guys that I think will be on the practice squad. Let me pull up the list of releases if I can find it, and I'll tell you who is likely going to be a practice squad guy. Aaron Wilson, I think, is as far as, unless you guys could point out somebody else, Aaron Wilson was the most money on getting the cuts out there very quickly and very accurately. I don't think he had any misfires. He had mentioned British Brooks possibly making the team before it was official. And okay, so for those of you just joining, Case Keenum is on the regular season injured reserve. There's a special injured reserve for Kurt Heinisch and Christian Harris, in which guys can return after 4 games. So that's likely, hopefully. The Christian Harris odyssey is a whole nother one. I wondered yesterday as I was thinking about Christian Harris, am I being overly pessimistic about this? But I mean, we've seen him try to practice once and he had to be helped off the field. So it's a little, we're in Kyle Tucker territory right now with Christian Harris. It's okay, maybe he's ready in 4 weeks, which is really 5 weeks by the time the season starts on the calendar. It's 5 weeks from now. But it's dicey. Let's see. Steven Sims Jr. makes the team. The cut downs. Oh, Feldarius Payne, I think he's a chance to come back to the practice squad. Those 3 defensive line that I mentioned, Solomon Byrd, Ollie Gay, and Marcus Harris, I think have a very good chance. So that'd be 4 defensive linemen on the practice squad. We know that D'Amico loves stockpiling defensive linemen, so I'm not I wouldn't be surprised if he stockpiled them on the defensive line. Feldarius Payne, remember, was released. Was it right before camp or very early in camp? And then they brought him back a little bit later on. So they like something about him. He's very undersized as well, but very, very athletic. And there's a chance for him there. I feel like I'm missing somebody that I should have talked about more. Oh, Chris Boyd. Yeah, he's on the team. I don't think Troy Harrison makes Troy Harrison had a rough last game. He had those holding penalties, and then he had missed blocks on top of that he probably felt like he might as well have held because he had a rough one. I don't think Lonnie Johnson comes back to the practice squad. This is just too cumbersome. I'll do a practice squad one tomorrow. I saw a Danico Autry question in there somewhere as I was scrolling by. Once Danico Autry comes back, they'll have to make some decisions because he's definitely going to make it. Texans and Lions in the bowl. That's a good prediction. Wasting an IR spot on Kurt Hinish. That's where, like, Hinish doesn't make a lot of big, impactful plays, but especially coaches like D'Amico, I think, value that he's very, very dependable in being where he's supposed to be. And as a linebacker, that's nice to have. That you know how you can fill, you know where the guy's going to be, and I think there might be some of that to it. So I think there's a chance that, depending on what they see out there or anything, that he might not be with the team the whole year, even after he comes back. But it's not a surprise that he made it. I thought because of the Marcus Harris presence, that if they wanted to keep Marcus Harris because they were afraid they were going to lose him on waivers, then I thought they might have made a decision between Kurt Hinish and Khalil Davis. They end up at least punting the decision down the road. Oh, no. All right, I came in here to prep right when there was a 3-run homer that turned it into 4-0. That team is out there playing with they're half a minor league team right now. You've got a bunch of all-stars, you've got a bunch of minor leaguers, and you've got whatever the hell Chaz McCormick is. Pitching staff is a whole different deal, except that you don't have enough relievers. God. Thank God for if it weren't for the Ghost Runner, they would be really screwed right now with the way the staff is composed. Yeah, Hinish plays like you said. He was a 90s defensive tackle. I think in the 90s he could have really made a name for himself as a defense. He's like myself. I couldn't play. I'd be an offensive guard so fast in this league these days. These defensive tackles are freaks, man. They're just freaks. And God bless them, because they're also. Let me tell you one thing about Gen Z. Hey, we can generalize this or generalize that. I'll say on the football side of things, I think these kids today are more professional in a lot of ways. Part of it's just that I think they've received better instruction on average in high school and in college. And then the resources in college on the coaching and strength and conditioning side is just way above and beyond whatever it used to be. But I think, like, for one, I would say I know this from talking to some guys that I've known that have been around forever. There's just a lot more guys nowadays that don't drink at all. Like, not even, like, they just don't drink. Like CJ, used to be your quarterback was a guy to go out with the boys and toss a few back. CJ will go out with the boys, but he doesn't drink or smoke and pot, and like, certainly there were only a few quarterbacks like that were hardcore smoking Marlboros past the 80s, I think. Kids, if you go back and look at some of the quarterbacks from the 70s and notice how yellow some of their teeth were. They were chain smokers. They'd go in at halftime and they'd smoke a few cigarettes. Not just the quarterbacks, lots of dudes. Cigarettes at halftime. That was like the standard thing you'd do. You'd go in and you'd smoke a cigarette at halftime. It's crazy. And then go play football. Justin Ross hitting his ass right now with the Gen X kids are way better. I don't know. The other thing, John, all right, let's be honest about our own generation. This is where I have a hard time. We are a generation that for a long time was known mostly for our apathy. Like, all of our hallmark things, grunge, what was the movie about the slackers or whatever? Like, we were known for our apathy. Our parents were hippies or who were in love with themselves for just, being upset about getting drafted, mostly, really, right? But once the threat of the draft went away, they were kind of like, oh, FL, I'm going to go get rich. So, but they were very idealistic when it came to saving their own asses. But once all that went away, they were stuck in an era where, okay, divorce was increasingly accepted, to an extreme degree, more so than it is now. Watching your kids was thought to be, frankly, a waste of time. And it left us, this group of just kind of wandering children around the neighborhood without even YouTube to give us guidance. And we just didn't give a damn about most stuff. I think whether you love them or hate them, these kids these days, I think they more genuinely care about stuff than we did when we were kids. And I'm generalizing here, obviously, but that's the feel I get. And I feel like I graduated high school in 1993. I felt like 1993 was peak apathy. I can remember going to like pep rallies and our class like just refusing to stand up and cheer. Like just asshole stuff like that. We were just assholes. And I think in 1993, like Nirvana was in full gear. There was no more hair bands, so that was a positive. That was a positive thing, or at least the hair bands weren't as relevant as they. I'm digressing to a far greater degree than I should be. We're the best of both. Okay, all right. No, I'm full bore. Look, I would be full bore gung ho Gen X, except the problem is I'm Gen X, and that kind of affiliating myself with a group or a cause, it just doesn't feel quite right. I can't do it as a proud Gen Xer. Some guys smoked on the sidelines. Yep. Gen X kids are toasted. Yeah, and that's the worst. We're all discovering gummies. That's the whole problem. Okay. All right. This is going to be my last little rant about Gen X, my own generation. So, you know what? I'll rant a little bit about the boomers because there were, you read all these studies now about psychedelics like LSD and mushrooms and other things that started off originally. Well, LSD did as a psychiatric drug, and they were having great success with it back in the 1950s. There were like movie stars that would give interviews about just how helpful it had been in their life and with therapy and like doing therapy. So it was a very, very promising drug. But then they got a hold of it, in the mass culture in the 60s, and it coincided with as people were expanding their horizons and questioning authority, kind of breaking down barriers about convention. It coincided nicely with like, yeah, I ain't abiding by your stinking draft. I read the Pentagon Papers, and my mind's been opened up. And so along with all of that, the establishment was shocked and dismayed that all these young long-haired kids were challenging the establishment. LSD seemed to be a big part of it. So they cracked down on LSD at the same level that they did cocaine and everything else, and pot too. Like they cracked down on pot and LSD at the same level that they did all of the hardcore drugs like heroin and everything else, because the people were freaked out. They were losing their minds, the establishment. And yet, so all of these boomers who had credited LSD with this just expanding their minds in ways that they never could have imagined, and they just saw things differently. Once the threat of the draft was gone, they were kind of like, okay, yeah, that's what we'll go. We'll just go, yeah, okay, I'll go get a job, and we'll keep treating LSD like it's the worst thing in the world, just as bad as heroin or anything. You just left for 30 years. And now they're starting to have studies come out that show that it can be used therapeutically and everything. So I call fraud on the self-congratulatory pats on the back that the former hippies love to give themselves about how they changed the world and everything. All right? A lot of you were just trying to save your own ass and get high as fuck while doing it. Please like, subscribe, everything else. We'll do it with the practice squad tomorrow if that's kind of kinky crap you're into these days.